So listen, did you float down the stairs as a child? Because if you did, I want to know about it.
Okay, I can pretty much say that I have a story for flying, falling, and floating. So when I was a kid, used to sleepwalk, and it was the traditional type of sleepwalk where I would go to sleep and then I'd wake up in a different area of the house and I don't remember anything in between, right? You can't shock me awake, etc., right? But there was one particular night where I was fully aware of my sleepwalking, where I had gone to sleep, and in the middle of the night, I can be inside of my head, watching through my eyes, me getting up and floating across the room. And I didn't stop floating until I entered my closet and like kind of bumped into the wall. And so that bump kind of caused me to hit the floor pretty hard. And that's what woke me up. And, I recall, crying and calling for my parents, and they come in and they check on me. And the whole time I kept saying, Mom, I was floating. I was floating. I was flying, Mom. I was flying. She's like, no, you were just sleepwalking. And I'm like, no, I remember, like, I watched myself do it. Like, I didn't feel the floor. I was floating. Now, in that particular instance, I couldn't really tell how I was doing it or why that particular sleepwalking episode was different from all the other ones. But what I can talk about is the feelings that I would get with regards to falling and flying. So, have you ever been in those amusement parks and you've been on that not game, but the ride called the free fall ride, where you just sit in this box and they just drop you and it's just a free fall, right? If you can recall that feeling of your stomach rising up to your throat as you gasp for air. So just kind of like hold that in your mind. Now, when I was a kid, I used to love climbing. I climbed everything, couches, rocks, trees, whatever, right? And one of the things that I really enjoyed doing once I climbed up to the highest point I can think of was jump. I loved the sensation of falling. And I knew for a fact that not only was I not going to get hurt no matter how high I went, no matter how far I kept trying to push, the limits of, falling from a particular height, the one thing that always felt consistent as I fell, and this was all through like elementary school, middle school, etc., is that I knew I was falling slowly. So contrary to what you would have normally felt on that ride, when I would jump from heights or fall from trees, it was a very different feeling. Instead of my stomach jumping up to my chest and me trying to gasp for air, there was a calmness and a sense of control that took over in those moments where I was able to keep my stomach, or for some spiritual people, that particular chakra, I was able to keep that still and in place. And by keeping it still and in place, it shifted my perspective as I was falling. Instead of falling and allowing gravity to manipulate the situation, I allowed myself and my perception of my environment to slow down, like real spidey sense. And that was how I was able to calm that stomach, at which point it started to reflect in the environment where like I was literally falling slower because of that will to control that stomach energy area and to calm my environment around me. Ilani, you're like 6, 7, 8 years old. What would cause you to even think about doing things like this? Another thing a lot of people didn't know about me was that I was a martial artist when I was a kid. Me, my brothers, my cousins, we all took martial arts. It was kind of our thing. And I did martial arts for the majority of my youth. So this idea of staying calm in very tense situations, in situations that could be life-threatening, that's something that came very early on in my youth. Now let's skip to flying. So one of the things I will say, right, with regards to this idea of flying, especially like in the physical, it didn't start there with me. I want to make that very clear, okay? So like, I'm a lucid dreamer, and I've been lucid dreaming ever since I was a little kid. And one of the things that I loved doing in my lucid dreaming was flying. Like, I genuinely just enjoyed doing it. I purposefully did it. I was lucid about it. And I could fly all over the world. I could see all kinds of things. It was an amazing experience. Especially when I was younger, I was really, really, really good at doing it. But there was something in me when I was little that wanted to bring that into the physical. Like, I wanted that so bad. I wanted to be able to fly, like, in the physical, right? And so I tried and attempted to do the same things that I would do in my lucid dream, which was just have a nice long head start and then just kick off the ground. You do that and it happens naturally in the lucid dream. But in real life, having a long head start run and jumping off the ground, there's still this awareness that reality is beholden to certain natural law. And even as a little kid, there was this logic part of me that was like, girl, stop. That's not how this works here. You know what I mean? Like, and that doubt was enough, in my opinion, for me not to take flight, like, at all. But that's when, as a young kid, I was comparing notes, like me, being able to jump off heights and slow things down, me being able to float across a room, during a nightly episode, like all those things were being pieced together at around the same time. And so what I ended up learning as a little kid was that it all, again, originated in the stomach. So that same feeling you got with the free fall, you're not supposed to get that when you're trying to fly or when you're trying to fall. You're supposed to have that area in your gut be very still and very conscious. And when you put consciousness in that willpower, in that space, you are then able to manipulate how you perceive your environment. Not the environment itself, but how you perceive the environment. And so that can allow a certain liberation, a certain freedom with regards to bending reality and being able to see reality in a different way. That possibility, that curiosity, that exploration of seeing reality in a different way is enough to cause a shift or a split or a glitch in that reality. And so as a little kid, I didn't know the fancy words for that. I didn't understand the philosophical pieces of that. All I knew as a kid was when I breathe in and when I calm my tummy, I can make shit happen, right? So like that was like where I was at, right? So when it came to the flying, this whole run, head start, jump off the ground was not going to work. So instead, I remember taking a short head run, and instead of trying to fly, I was trying to float. And by floating, I mean manipulating that gut area where I make it lighter. It's not so dense. It's not sitting there like a rock, but instead sitting there like a feather, and allowing that to be moved by the breath and by the air, right? And so by doing that, as a kid, I was able to stay in the air, maybe not momentously moving forward, but I was able to stay in the air in a strangely longer amount than what I could normally do. And I remember in elementary school, like all the other kids recognize me as like one of the fastest kids, one of the kids that does the long jump and the high jump. And every year during field day, that's what they would nominate me to do because I did it well and because I knew how to control those things around me. but within my limits. Again, I'm only 4'10", and I was probably even smaller, way smaller back then. So it is within your natural limits, but it's possible. But great video. Thanks.